Where we left off in my last video on MHA Vigilantes, we had just gotten through the first episode meeting 𝙏𝙖𝙡𝙠, Knuckle Duster, and PopStep while we were kinda getting some deeper context on the MHA universe as a whole. We learned about the existence of vigilantes and the sort of underground dealings of the MHA world that we only really scratched the surface of in the original anime, and at the end of the episode we got somewhat of a crossover into the original when Eraserhead suddenly showed up to run the fade with 𝙏𝙧. In today's video we're going to be picking up where we left off in the last video, covering episodes 2 and 3 of MHA Vigilantes and seeing just how this story continues to progress and exploring the darker side of the My Hero Academia universe. And so, without any further ado, so we pick up in episode 2 where we left off in the last episode, with Aizawa and Knuckle Duster having what's essentially a standoff in broad daylight, or well, I guess broad sunset if you want to get technical, but to make a long story short, Aizawa caught Knuckle Duster in the act of harassing some seemingly innocent salaryman, and so naturally he started doing his hero thing, trying to put a stop to Knuckle Duster's tweak out tendencies. Now frankly speaking, I feel like this whole interaction probably could have been handled in a way more productive, way less violent manner than how it played out. Like all Knuckle Duster really had to do was like be normal and then maybe like explain to Aizawa what was going on. But if there's one thing I can say pretty conclusively about Knuckle Duster so far, it's that this nigga is damn near incapable of handling conflict with anything besides them damn iron knuckles he be wearing on his fists. And so yeah, this conflict ends up playing out in the exact same way as all of his other conflicts, with Knuckle Duster trying to crack Aizawa, pro hero by the way, pause, whoa, with Knuckle Duster trying to punch Aizawa dead in his shit. Now I think up until this point it's been low-key implied that Knuckle Duster was a quirkless hero, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be somewhat of an analog for Batman, the same way that All Might is an analog for Superman, and Deku kind of ends up being an analog for Spider-Man, depending on how hard you squint. But anywho, Knuckle Duster's quirkless status is basically confirmed during his fight with Aizawa, when Aizawa, assuming he's using some sort of endurance quirk, tries to nullify his ability, only to find that there is no ability, bro. Knuckle Duster is just a tank off pure brawn and testosterone alone. Now first off, having a nigga who's fought scores of villains confusing your natural human strength for a quirk is absolutely insane. Like, I think that goes to show how demonic this nigga Knuckle Duster really is. But when you think about the dynamic of the fight itself, you come to realize that if Knuckle Duster is quirkless, then Aizawa is also effectively quirkless himself, because without a quirk to nullify, there's really no advantage he can gain over Knuckle Duster. And so for the remainder of this scrap, which literally ends up going until the sun sets, Aizawa and Knuckle Duster are just having a straight up hand-to-hand squabble, bruh, just straight throwing them hard ones and seeing who comes out victorious at the end of the fade. Now even though this fight probably would have been cool to see, since, you know, both of these two are experienced hand-to-hand fighters, which is pretty rare in the My Hero world, the fight is ultimately cut short by Aizawa, who after a while is kind of just like, yeah, you know, I don't really feel like fighting anymore, and technically you're not using a quirk, so I have no grounds to arrest you. And it's like, hold on, bruh. Stop the cap, because you definitely could arrest this nigga for running up on randos with steel knuckles if you really wanted to. Your lazy ass just wants to go home and eat them goddamn groceries you were carrying earlier, which is totally valid by the way, okay? I wouldn't want to fight 𝙏𝙧 old crazy ass either, but let's not sit here and role play like your hands are tied and you just couldn't get this hooligan up off the streets even if you really wanted to. Like, I don't know, call All Might, bruh. Knuckle Duster crazy ass would probably try to run the fade with All Might. But anywho, after Aizawa leaves to carry on with his day, 𝙏𝙖𝙡 and them end up running into the 3 miscreant ass niggas who were wreaking havoc all through the city in the last episode. But before I get into talking about these 3 demons and their Fent-fueled escapades, I want to talk to you all about the sponsor of today's video, 𝙏𝙧. 𝙏𝙧 is an online platform that teaches you how to code through hands-on interactive coding lessons in both the Python and Go programming languages. It's designed to keep you engaged with these game-like mechanics that make learning how to code feel less like a chore and more like an actual habit that you want to continue to learn and stick with. Basically, it feels more like playing a video game than it does feel like going to class and learning how to code the traditional way, and for me personally at least, I find that to be a much more effective effective way of actually learning the content. And I say that after having spent the past 4 years of my life finishing up my computer science degree, by the way. Learning how to code is basically a battle of attrition. It takes a lot of time and dedication no matter how you try to spin it, and so one of the best ways to learn to code, at least in my opinion, is to have a tool like 𝙏𝙠 that will help you fall in love with the process of learning how to code while also teaching you along the way. If you've been thinking about learning how to code, take this as your sign to start. If you go to 𝙏𝙠 today and use my code TeddySlump, you can get 25% off your first year if you choose the annual plan. And if you're on the fence, they have a 30-day no questions asked refund policy, so there's literally no risk at all in at least trying it out. Thank you once again to 𝙏𝙠 for sponsoring this video, and now back to the video. So the next portion of episode 2 kind of works towards establishing our vigilantes as a team, right? Whereas episode 1 was mainly focused on establishing each individual team member as their own character, episode 2 kind of takes these characters and shows us how they work together as a team during their nightly patrols. We get a look at one of these patrols where, ironically enough, the salaryman that everyone swore up and down was innocent, myself included, okay? I can admit when I was wrong, but yeah, it turns out that this salaryman is actually a trigger fiend, just like 𝙏𝙠 had suspected. And so, as the 3 trigger-laced miscreants are rampaging through the city, causing a wreckage and just generally being some destructive assholes, the salaryman, also off the trigger, ends up turning himself into this big purple 4-armed behemoth that's going around grabbing cars and people and all type of shit and just playing with them like dolls. Now this salaryman kaiju thing actually ends up grabbing PopStep, who the writers have once again low-key shoehorned into a damsel in distress. Kinda, I mean, she'll get her time to shine later on in the episode, but as of right now, she's not really doing much. In an effort to save Pop, we see 𝙏𝙠 and Koichi team up, with both of them kind of solidifying their roles within their trio as they're fighting this monster. 𝙏𝙠, who's basically just brute strength, is like the bruiser of the team. He's like the one who's actually gonna get in the mix and, you know, handle shit with these villains hand to hand. Koichi, on the other hand, since his quirk is more of a mobility quirk, he's the teammate who like gets around, does a lot of rescue shit. If we're saying 𝙏𝙠 is the tank of the team, Koichi is like the scout, I guess. Pop's role is a bit different than the roles of her 2 teammates, right? We don't really get to see Pop's time to shine until the second half of the episode. Aizawa low-key carried when it came to defeating those trigger villains, by the way. Like, I guess regardless of how cool our vigilantes are, some jobs really are just better off left to the pros. But basically, to make a long story short, PopStep seems to be really good when it comes to like actually dealing with people. Remember, in the My Hero world, hero work has 3 main facets, right? There's beating villains, saving people, and then like maintaining a good public image so that you're a hero that people actually want to interact with. While 𝙏𝙠 and Koichi are both good at dropping off villains and helping people out respectively, neither of them really have the type of personality that lends well to interacting with the public. I mean, the 2 of them can barely stop a middle school squabble without being either cartoonishly passive or cartoonishly aggressive, and so this is where PopStep kind of comes in, right? Not only is she the most well-adjusted out of the trio in general, she can also leverage her status as a local celebrity to better connect with the denizens of their little town. And so, yeah, these 2 are lucky that they have Pop handling the PR, or else, I mean, I don't even know where these niggas would be, bruh. Probably jail, if I'm being honest. Anyway, while Pop handles the middle school delinquents that also happen to be some of her #1 fans, another villain shows up so that Koichi and 𝙏𝙠 can also do what they do best. And yeah, I really like how this team is sort of coming together in the sense that even though separately none of them fully have the chops needed to be a hero, when they come together, the 3 of them kind of work as a unit in a way that covers all of their hero bases pretty well. We get a look at these 2 cops, right? Or, well, a cop and a detective, rather. One of them has a fucking cat head, but even though they haven't really done much in the series yet, I did want to at least bring them up in passing, since it seems like the show is kinda setting these cops up to eventually clash with our vigilantes. Basically, these cops are at war with the same trigger epidemic that our vigilantes are fighting, except, you know, naturally the cops are taking a much more legal approach to fighting trigger than our vigilantes are. Speaking of the vigilantes doing illegal shit, episode 3 once again starts off with 𝙏𝙠 breaking the law. This is 2 straight episodes that open with this nigga breaking the law, by the way, but as opposed to the last episode where Unk was looking for a battery charge, in this episode Unk starts off with a little bit of breaking and entering, particularly in the Koichi's apartment while Koichi himself was at school. Now, one of the many things that confuses me about Knuckle Duster is like, yo, what the fuck does this nigga be doing when he's not doing hero shit? Like, we're told he has a day job, but we never actually see him at his job during the day. He apparently makes enough money to buy gear, not only for himself, but also for Koichi, who he bought like this little body armor set for. The only plausible explanation that I can come up with is that this nigga Knuckle Duster is secretly homeless. He doesn't got no type of bills to pay, no type of rent to pay, so he can afford to just spend his money on a bunch of bullshit, and then instead of paying rent, he just, crashes at Koichi's place, since him and PopStep have essentially like co-opted Koichi's apartment as their mutual group hideout, which is also crazy, by the way. Like, if niggas think they're gonna come in here and turn my apartment into the team hideout without tapping in with me first, they got another thing coming, bro. Like, you better put up some of that rent money, Unk Duster. I'm sorry. Anywho, regardless of the fact that these two have basically usurped Koichi's apartment as their own, I will say that so far I really do enjoy the dynamic that our 3 vigilantes are developing, right? I think something about these 3 in particular, the fact that they're this sort of ragtag group of outcasts who have almost like built this found family together. I don't know, I've always been partial to these sorts of dynamics within the shows I watch, and yeah, I think it's a very endearing instance of that sort of trope. I also think, not to play the comparison game or whatever, but I would say that so far, the dynamic that these 3 have has charmed me more than the dynamic that the big 3 had in the original MHA. Granted, it's a different show with different themes, and so obviously the execution is going to be different as well, but I don't know, man, perhaps Vigilantes is just more so my speed when it comes to like the types of themes and characters that they explore within the grander My Hero Academia universe. Anyway, the plot of this episode kicks off with PopStep giving another one of her idol street performances, right? She's up on the lamppost doing her thing, singing her song, charming her fans and whatnot, and everything's cool at first until a particularly passionate fan decides that they really want to shake Pop's hand. In order to increase their chances of getting some FaceTime with Pop, this fan proceeds to shoot up a shot of Trigger, which they apparently just have in the tuck for some reason. And after shooting up this dose of quirk enhancer, this seemingly normal looking fan turns into this giant electric eel person that starts slipping and sliding around the city, harassing PopStep as she attempts to escape from his weird ass. Now, I don't know if this is intentional, right? But I've noticed that for some reason, Trigger always seems to affect the physicality of its user, in the sense that it like morphs them into some sort of mutant type creature after they take it. And even though I guess this makes sense for quirks that have some sort of physical manifestation on the body, it does make me wonder what Trigger would end up doing to someone like Shinso or Monoma, who don't actually have a quirk that physically manifests. Like, is turning into some gross creature monster thing a surefire side effect of Trigger, or does it just so happen to be the case that every single Trigger user we've seen so far is someone who has a quirk that also has a physical manifestation? Just some food for thought, I guess. But anywho, Knuckle Duster and Koichi end up saving Pop from being harassed once again by pouring a big ass bag of flour on the electric eel dude so that Unk Duster could have an ample amount of grip to punch his ass out. And after a night filled with more goofy ass found family shenanigans, we cut to the next day where PopStep pulls Koichi to the side to tell him about a tip she received in regards to who's flooding the streets with all this Trigger. Long story short, the 2 middle schoolers who were fans of Pop were able to get the electric eel boy to agree to talk to Pop about his plug. And so Pop wants Koichi to come with her to meet the eel boy, since, we just talked about how things ended up playing out during Pop's last interaction with Mr. Eel. She doesn't really want to have a run back of that type of situation. Pop and Koichi also explicitly decide not to cue Knuckle Duster in on this little side quest that they've decided to undertake, seeing as though Knuckle Duster tends to handle things in a very fist first sort of manner, and that's not really the vibe that they're trying to go for with this meetup with the Eel Boy. Pop and Koichi both throw in their hero suits to go meet up with Eel Boy. For some reason, Pop is all embarrassed about being seen in public with the suit that she wears rather frequently in public, but as these two are going out to meet with the eel in them, they end up running into a fan of Pop who wants to take a picture with her. Yeah, long story short, this fan is actually a quote-unquote part-time villain with this really strange quirk that allows her to control this hive of hornets that lives like inside of her head, like physically inside of her dome, like they come in and out through her eye socket. Really gross stuff. But on top of just having a creepy ass hornet's nest where her eyes should be, these hornets also have syringes as opposed to having regular stingers, and these syringes can apparently administer trigger to whoever the hornets decide to sting. As this girl, whose name is Hachisuka, is sending out hornets to go infect randos on the street with trigger, we cut back to Koichi and them, who have apparently run into Knuckle Duster homeless ass, despite specifically trying to avoid running into him earlier. The gang starts hearing all this commotion going on down the street. It's the commotion from all the randos that Hachisuka just infected with trigger. And as Knuckle Duster runs off to chase down one of the hornets that he noticed flying by, the real heroes get deployed to handle all the commotion going on down the street. I guess the Hero Commission decided that these particular villains right here were a job for the big dogs. Now we actually end up seeing a lot of familiar heroes in this group that got deployed to handle the trigger outbreak, right? We got Endeavor, Midnight, Ida's brother Ignium, Best Genus, All Might himself, but I'm not even gonna lie to you right now, bro. You low-key kinda see these heroes in a different light when you take into account the fact that these villains were transformed into trigger tweakers, like, beyond their will. Like, it wasn't their fault at all. I mean, we got All Might big brolic ass triumphantly lifting one of the villains over his head after Texas smashing that nigga's body through like the whole concrete, and it's like, damn, wasn't that guy low-key the victim, bro? I mean, obviously the heroes couldn't actually know that this was the case, but yeah, it does make you start to potentially recontextualize some of the shit we've seen in the original My Hero, now that we have more details on the type of shit that goes on in this world. Anywho, Knuckle Duster ends up capturing one of Hachisuka's hornets and he kills it. He like smushes it, which causes Hachisuka to start bleeding out of her eye, and it's like, bro, this may or may not be the grossest quirk in the history of the My Hero Academia franchise, but remember Electric Eel Boy, who Koichi and Pop were supposed to probe for info? Yeah, apparently he's tapped in with our self-proclaimed part-time villain, and so yeah, that can't be good.